The first thing Naruto noticed was the silence. No hum of chakra in the air, no distant thrum of nature energy, just an eerie stillness that made his skin prickle. He blinked against the harsh sunlight filtering through unfamiliar trees, their branches bare and brittle, as if drained of life. His fingers flexed instinctively, reaching for the familiar weight of his kunai pouch, but the holster was empty. Even his orange jumpsuit felt different, lighter, less reinforced, as if the very fabric had lost its resilience. A rustle in the undergrowth snapped his attention forward. A figure emerged, tall, clad in a ragged cloak, with eyes that gleamed like polished steel. No chakra signature. No aura. Just raw, predatory intent. The man lunged, movements sharp and efficient, a dagger flashing toward Naruto's throat. Instinct took over. Naruto twisted, his body moving on muscle memory alone, but the counter was sluggish, his reflexes dulled without chakra enhancement. The blade grazed his shoulder, drawing a thin line of blood. "Who the hell are you?" Naruto growled, retreating a step, his mind racing. This wasn't a genjutsu, he'd broken enough of those to know. The pain was real. The lack of chakra was real. The attacker didn't answer. Instead, he struck again, his dagger weaving a deadly pattern. Naruto ducked, pivoted, and drove a fist toward the man's ribs. The impact should have sent him flying, should have cracked bone, but the hit landed with a dull thud, barely staggering the assailant. The man smirked, revealing yellowed teeth, and retaliated with a knee to Naruto's gut. Air burst from his lungs as he doubled over, but he forced himself to roll aside just as the dagger plunged into the dirt where his head had been. No chakra. No jutsu. Just bare-knuckle survival. Naruto's mind flashed back to his early days at the academy, before he'd mastered the shadow clone jutsu, before he'd even understood what chakra was. Back then, he'd relied on sheer stubbornness and dirty tricks. Maybe that's what this world demanded. The attacker came at him again, blade humming through the air. Naruto feinted left, then dropped low, sweeping a leg out. The man stumbled, and Naruto seized the opening, driving an elbow into his temple. The dagger clattered to the ground. Naruto snatched it up, flipping it in his grip just in time to parry a second strike from another assailant, this one broader, wielding a crude axe. The axe came down in a brutal arc. Naruto barely deflected it, the force vibrating up his arm. He countered with a slash toward the man's wrist, drawing a yelp of pain. Blood sprayed, but the attacker didn't relent. He swung again, and Naruto barely dodged, the axe head carving a gash in the tree behind him. 2 against 1. No chakra. No allies. Naruto's breath came in ragged gasps, but his lips curled into a grin. This was familiar. This was a fight he could understand. He feigned exhaustion, letting his shoulders slump, baiting the axe wielder into overcommitting. The man took the bait, lunging with a roar. Naruto sidestepped at the last second, driving the dagger deep into the man's side. A choked gurgle escaped his lips as he crumpled. The first attacker, now back on his feet, hesitated. Naruto didn't. He charged, slamming a shoulder into the man's chest, sending them both crashing into the dirt. They rolled, fists flying, until Naruto pinned him, pressing the dagger to his throat. "Talk," Naruto demanded, his voice rough. "Where the hell am I?" The man spat blood. "You're in the dead zone. Where warriors come to die." Before Naruto could press further, a distant horn blared, a sound like a dying beast. The man's eyes widened in genuine fear. "They're coming," he whispered. "The hollow ones." Naruto barely had time to process the words before the trees shook, and figures emerged from the shadows, pale, emaciated, their eyes hollow pits. They moved with unnatural speed, their limbs twitching like marionettes. No chakra. No weapons. Just a world that wanted him dead. Naruto tightened his grip on the dagger. If this was his new reality, he'd survive it. Just like he always had. The air was thick with tension as Naruto Uzumaki stood in the center of the ruined city, his breath ragged, his fists clenched. Around him, the remnants of a world without chakra stretched endlessly, a stark contrast to the vibrant battles he once knew. But this was no illusion, this was reality, and his enemies were closing in. Sasuke Uchiha lunged first, his movements sharp despite the absence of Sharingan. He feinted left, then twisted mid-air, driving his knee toward Naruto's ribs. Naruto barely dodged, rolling to the side as the ground cracked under the force of Sasuke's strike. Still fast, Naruto growled, wiping sweat from his brow. But not fast enough. He pivoted on his heel, launching a spinning kick that Sasuke blocked with crossed arms, skidding back from the impact. Nearby, Sakura Haruno squared off against an unfamiliar foe, a towering figure clad in black armor, his fists crackling with an eerie energy. You rely too much on brute force, the man taunted, dodging her punches with unnerving ease. Sakura gritted her teeth. Without chakra-enhanced strength, she had to rely on precision. She waited for his next strike, then sidestepped, driving her elbow into his ribs. The man grunted but retaliated with a backhand that sent her sprawling. Naruto saw Sakura hit the ground and roared, charging at the armored enemy. But Sasuke intercepted him, slamming a fist into his gut. Naruto coughed but grabbed Sasuke's wrist, flipping him over his shoulder. Sasuke twisted mid-fall, landing in a crouch, his eyes burning with determination. "You're distracted," he hissed. "That'll get you killed." Meanwhile, Kakashi Hatake fought a shadowy figure wielding twin daggers. The clash of steel rang through the air as Kakashi parried each strike, his movements fluid despite the unfamiliar weight of exhaustion. His mind raced. Without chakra, his usual tactics were useless. He had to adapt. Feigning a stumble, he lured his opponent in, then snapped his leg up in a vicious kick to the jaw. The figure staggered, and Kakashi pressed the advantage, disarming him with a swift twist of his wrist. Back with Naruto and Sasuke, the battle escalated. Naruto ducked under a sweeping kick, countering with a punch that grazed Sasuke's cheek. Blood trickled from the corner of Sasuke's mouth, but he smirked. "You've gotten sloppy," he taunted. Naruto grinned back. "Or maybe you've gotten slow." They clashed again, fists a blur, each strike carrying the weight of their rivalry. Sakura, now back on her feet, analyzed the armored foe. His energy wasn't chakra, it was something else. She recalled medical texts, theories about alternative energy sources. If she could disrupt his flow. She dashed forward, feigning another direct attack. The man swung, but at the last second, she dropped low, driving her fist into his knee. A sickening crack echoed as he howled in pain. Kakashi finished his opponent with a well-placed strike to the temple, then turned to see the others still locked in combat. "Naruto. Sasuke. We need to end this now," he shouted. Naruto heard him and nodded, his muscles screaming as he pushed past his limits. He grabbed Sasuke's arm, flipping him onto the ground, but Sasuke twisted, locking Naruto in a chokehold. Gasping for air, Naruto's vision blurred. But then, a flicker. A familiar warmth in his chest. Was it chakra? No, something different. Raw willpower. With a roar, he broke free, his fist glowing faintly as he struck Sasuke's chest. The force sent Sasuke flying, skidding across the rubble. Sakura seized her moment, delivering a crushing blow to the armored man's spine. He collapsed, his energy flickering out. Kakashi joined her, panting. "We did it," she breathed. But the battle wasn't over. The ground trembled as a monstrous figure emerged from the shadows, their true enemy. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura, and Kakashi stood together, battered but unbroken. "This ends now," Naruto declared, his voice steady. The final clash began. Word count, 1000. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of blood as Naruto and his allies stood battered but unbroken against the towering figure of their enemy, the self-proclaimed god of silence, whose very presence had drained the world of chakra. The battlefield was a wasteland of shattered earth and smoldering ruins, the remnants of a world that had once thrived on energy now lost. Naruto's muscles screamed in protest as he tightened his grip on a crude kunai, his knuckles white. Without chakra, they had been forced to rely on raw physical combat, ingenuity, and sheer willpower. Sasuke, panting heavily beside him, wiped a streak of blood from his brow. "This ends now," he muttered, his voice hoarse. Their enemy smirked, flexing his gauntleted fingers. "You still don't understand. Without chakra, you're nothing. Just mortals waiting to be crushed." Naruto's jaw set. "We don't need chakra to prove we're stronger than you." With a roar, he lunged, dodging a sweeping strike that cratered the ground where he'd stood moments before. The fight became a blur of motion, Sasuke darting in with precise strikes, Sakura using her medical knowledge to exploit pressure points, and Naruto weaving through attacks with instinct honed by years of battle. But the enemy was relentless, his movements unnaturally fluid, as if he still held some remnant of the power he'd stolen. A backhanded blow sent Naruto skidding across the dirt, his vision swimming. He tasted copper, spat, and forced himself up. Then, in a flash of insight, he remembered Jiraiya's words from long ago, "True strength isn't in what you can take, it's in what you can give." Naruto's eyes widened. Maybe they didn't need chakra to win. Maybe they just needed to remind the world what it meant to fight for something greater. Gritting his teeth, he charged again, not at the enemy, but toward Sasuke and Sakura. "Trust me," he shouted. Without hesitation, they moved as one, their bodies falling into a rhythm deeper than chakra, deeper than jutsu. Sasuke feinted left, Sakura struck low, and Naruto leapt high, driving his kunai toward the enemy's throat. The blade connected, not with flesh, but with the amulet around his neck, the source of his stolen power. A crack echoed across the battlefield, and for the first time, fear flickered in the enemy's eyes. A shockwave erupted, hurling them all apart. Naruto hit the ground hard, gasping as the world seemed to shudder. Then, light. A brilliant, golden pulse radiated from the shattered amulet, and with it, a whisper of warmth flooded his veins. Chakra. Not just his, but everyone's, returning in a tidal wave of energy. The enemy howled as his stolen power rebounded, surging back into the world. Naruto felt it, the familiar rush of Kurama's presence, Sasuke's Sharingan flickering to life, Sakura's healing glow reigniting. But this time, it was different. The energy wasn't just theirs, it was shared, interconnected. The enemy staggered, his form flickering like a dying flame. Impossible. He choked. Naruto stood, his body alight with renewed strength. "This is what you never understood," he said, his voice steady. "Chakra isn't just power. It's the bonds between people. And you can't destroy that." With a final, united strike, they unleashed everything, a Rasengan, a Chidori, a devastating punch, all converging in a cataclysmic explosion of light. Silence. Then, the wind carried away the ashes of their foe. The aftermath was quiet, solemn. The world had changed, not just because Chakra had returned, but because its absence had forced them to rediscover what truly made them strong. Villages began to rebuild, not as separate nations, but as a united front. Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura stood at the center of it all, their bond unshakable. As the sun set over the healed land, Naruto smiled. The fight was over, but their story, just like Chakra, would flow endlessly into the future.